What's up, YouTube? Want to do part 2 on the home defense plan, and in this video I wanted to cover the shotgun. I chose to do this video first because I believe in most circumstances, where you live and the size of your house, everything will dictate what weapon would be or firearm would be best for you. But what I prefer and what I usually recommend to people who ask is a shotgun. Just a basic pump shotgun. I'll verify this is unloaded both visually and physically on a shotgun. I like to, physically look, poke in there, make sure you're seeing the follower and not another shell that's in there. This is an 870 clone. This is a Norinco, Chinese-made, basically clone of a Remington 870. I think the current production actually of this is better than the current production of the basic 870 tackles and expresses and stuff that are coming out of Remington right now. I had one, or I still have one, that required a lot of work and fiddling with to get to work. So just watch on your shotgun purchases. I'm not personally a fan of the Mossberg controls where their safety is, the tongue safety, but they do build a decent shotgun. The Mossbergs I have all work right out of the box. I mean, they're not as tight feeling, and I don't like I said, the actual manipulation of it as good as an 870. But I think current production, if I was just going to go out and buy one to use it, I mean, obviously I would test it, but I feel current production of Mossbergs, you're probably going to have a better chance of getting a good one than on Remington, unfortunately. But like I said, this is a clone of an 870. Everything, the controls and everything are the same. Most of the parts all interchange. But anyways, what I wanted to cover is how I basically store my 12 gauge, my shotgun, next to the bedside. And you may have heard the term before, but cruiser ready is how I store mine. And what that does is it just takes a lot of the fine motor skill manipulation out of the shotgun when you need to use it. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to half cog it here, make sure nothing was in there that went in. If you have the safety on and the action closed, what it's doing is basically there's a lock feature on there that it locks the action until the trigger's pulled. This is basically, once you pump it, it's telling you, okay, there's a round in the chamber, it needs to fire, or you need to press the action bar release here. You press that, and it'll allow the action open without firing, without pulling the trigger. So if you store it this way, no round in the chamber, and the shell's in the magazine tube, what you'll get is, a lockup, and you have to press this action bar release in order to get the action open. So under stress, a lot of people just don't realize that, or don't train with it enough to know what's going on or what you have to press. And it's fine if you're standing in range and you're just playing around with it. Oh, what is that? Oh yeah, that. But in a stressful situation, you're not going to be thinking right anyway. As far as your stress level is going to be way elevated. So what I do is I do it what's cruiser ready. So basically how you do that is you verify the gun's unloaded, half cock, make sure, verify that nothing started to go up into the chamber, close the action, turn the safety off. I'm going to point this in the safe direction, which the safe direction here is down at the floor of my house, which is concrete. So now I've pulled the trigger on that. So now I've turned the safety off, pulled the trigger on an empty chamber. At this point, I would load the magazine tube. I think this one holds 6. So I'd load 6 rounds, and I'd store it that way. Now, that's safety off, right? And typically I wouldn't advocate anything with safety off that has a safety, but I don't have a round chambered. I know, I verified, I do not have a round chambered in this gun. So what that does is it is easier for someone to pick up and use that may not have trained a lot on a shotgun. Like your spouse, like I said, you should take them out shooting. They should know how to use it. But under stress, you want to basically make it as easy to use as possible. Now what that does is basically if something happens, bang in the night or whatever reason you need to deploy this gun, all you have to do is grab it, pump it. Now I just loaded around. I didn't because I verified it was empty. But at that point I would have loaded around in the chamber. Safety's already off. All I have to do is manipulate the trigger. Now if there's not a threat right there right away, I can always turn the safety on. And see, verify the situation, whatever. At that point, I can turn the safety off and fire if needed. But that's the best way I found to store a shotgun bedside for multiple users to use it if need be. Like I said, if your spouse needs to use it, if you can train him or her, whatever, to use, is basically you just pump it like a normal shotgun. Most people under stress can figure that out. Just basically just pump it, and it's ready to go. That's how I store mine. Like I said, and my personal choice, I like double-aught buck. It's a good round. It's really a devastating round if you have to use it in a defensive situation. It tends to stop the fight fast. Now, your personal situation where you live, if you live in an apartment, double-aught buck's probably not going to be the best choice. You might be able to go down to like number 4 buck, something like that, with a smaller pellet that doesn't have as much energy to penetrate walls. I personally wouldn't advocate like birdshot. That's something you'd need to look into. Birdshot is devastating from 3 yards away or so in a defensive scenario. But me personally, I don't use birdshot. But like I said, my view may change on that if I lived in an apartment, or lived right next to my neighbors, because once you pull the trigger, you're responsible for all that stuff that goes down, anything that goes down range. So that's something you need to look into on your end, your plan, if that'll work for you or not. Me personally, I don't advocate the use of birdshot for defense. I could also use slugs if I wanted to. Anybody can use slugs. If you live out where you're not really next to your neighbors, your house aren't stacked together, you're not in an apartment. It's not a big issue. With over-penetration, it's not going to go into somebody else's house. Slugs are good. They're obviously devastating as well in a defensive situation. And if you watch my other video on slug patterns, on buckshot patterns, you don't get much spread anyway from defensive distances. So, slug could be an option for you if everything else applies as far as over-penetration. But I wanted to cover these first. Shotgun first in my series, because I believe a shotgun, if your scenario dictates it, you can use it, the way your house set up or your apartment or however. If you can use a shotgun, this is probably the best tool for home defense in certain scenarios. If you can fit it in there, if a shotgun works, it's probably going to be the best firearm to use in a home defense situation. And what's nice about a shotgun, or basically just a rifle length setup, is you have multiple points of contact. You have your buttstock against your shoulders 1, ribbon is 2, you got your cheek well 3, you got your hand up here 4. So you got basically 4 points of contact on this weapon for accurate fire. A nice stable shooting platform. Whereas a handgun, you don't. A handgun does take a lot more training, I believe, to use correctly under stress. So if you don't dedicate the time and effort to training with a handgun to where you're comfortable with your ability, a shotgun is a good choice because I think obviously you should still train on it, but I think it requires a little less hours of skill set to manipulate correctly. Another thing I run on here is a light. This is just a stream light. It's nothing really fancy, nothing really all that expensive, but I believe a weapons light is required on a home defense weapon, because basically it's going to happen, if you're home, it's probably going to happen at night, when you're in bed asleep or whatever, late at night, basically during dark hours. It's usually not going to happen during the daylight. It could, and plan for that as well, but generally speaking, it's going to be at nighttime. This particular setup, like I said, when this light's deployed, if you can see the spill of that light, actually lights up the front sight. This is about a 300 lumen light. It's not super bright, because you don't really want 1,000 lumen inside your house, because when it hits light colored paint or something, it can actually temporarily blind you as well. You'll lose your night vision instantly. Even with this one, you're probably going to lose your night vision right away. Your eyes adapt to the dark. You can kind of see a little better once you light this light up. That's going to be all gone. You're going to have to rely on that light at that point afterwards to see anything. But you should be able to have some sort of light to deploy, whether you run a handgun, run a separate light, whether you run a rifle-mounted light, whatever. You have to ID your target, or you have to ID it as a threat, because it may be your teenager sneaking in, after hours and tripped over the couch or something. So you have to ID what you deem a threat. And light's pretty much the only way to do that if everything else is off. If nothing else, I went through some tactical classes where the guy says, I've done a lot of room clearing, and he says the most tactical way to clear a room is reach over and turn on the light. You know, and it made a lot of sense when you think about it. You know, because then it takes all the light manipulation out of it. It takes out, you know, where you got a beacon coming out, lighting you up. You know, if he's hiding somewhere in the shadows, where. So it was actually some good, but actually quite funny advice the way he delivered it. So once again, I just want to cover shotguns. It don't have to be a 12 gauge. It could be a 20 gauge. It could be a 410. You know, if you're recoil sensitive, if you're kind of smaller in stature or whatever, if the recoil is just too much for you, you can always drop down. 20 gauge is definitely acceptable for home defense. Even 410 is quite devastating from you know, a defensive scenario that you find in your house. So just wanted to cover that, guys. The pros on this is it's kind of easy to aim. You know, as far as you getting the buttstock on your shoulder, it's devastating if you get around on target. It's a fast fight stopper. You know, and I won't say it's a one-shot stop guaranteed, because there's, you know, obviously case scenarios where it hasn't been, but it is devastating. It's a lot more devastating than a handgun round if you deliver one on target. Like I said, probably a con would be it's heavy. It's got, you know, a decent amount of recoil. It does require some training. You know, if you don't use it cruiser ready, then you have to manipulate the action bar release. So it's all stuff you need to train on, how you feel comfortable storing this. Once again, and then just to cover storage, your storage issues may be different than mine. If you have, you know, small children in your house or whatever, anybody that you wouldn't feel or should get a hold of that gun when you're gone, you'll have to look into some storage issues, whether it be, you know, cable lock, safe, whatever. You know, I wouldn't go with the hiding it route, because unfortunately kids are one of the best detectives around. They can find anything. So just be responsible as a gun owner. Just because it's a home defense weapon doesn't mean it's a, you know, free for all. Just leave out and whatever at all times if your particular situation doesn't cover that. So like I said, just be responsible as well. But anyways, guys, just want to cover that. I'll go on and make a handgun video. Handguns I believe also are really good in a home defense scenario and setup. But once again, I do believe in most cases a shotgun is, you know, the best for most people, especially people who don't, like I said, spend a lot of time training with the handgun, because more than likely they're going to miss you know, their intended target or whatever if you happen to engage a threat with a handgun. And that's something I'll cover in the handgun video. But anyways, guys, like I said, thanks for watching. Like I said, just some basics on a shotgun and how I keep mine cruiser ready, and maybe that'll help you guys with a setup you're thinking about. All right, thanks for watching, guys.